Riley shows us how some in our local community are reacting to the milestone in Your Voice, Your Vote coverage.
A moment on the tarmac between Kamala Harris and the Milwaukee mayor's two young daughters during the first presidential campaign stop in Wisconsin. Regardless of political affiliations, the possibility of the first woman of color serving as president of the United States is a historical milestone. After officially securing her spot at the top of the ticket Friday, people in Northeast Wisconsin are sharing their thoughts.
Does it make you feel like girls can do anything?
Yeah.
We spoke with some mothers and young girls in Green Bay who say the idea of a female president makes them feel a new sense of possibility.
Through our history, we always had men presidents, so maybe having a woman in Congress and as a president, it will give us a fresh start and to open our world to more possibilities.
It makes me feel amazing because girls rule the world.
Rhonda Chandler, founder and executive director of the Green Bay organization Loving the Skin I'm In, says she hopes Harris's success will inspire young girls.
I think it's a historic moment for our girls. It just confirms that they can be anything. They can do anything. And I always, try to encourage them and tell them the sky's the limit.
Chandler says for many of these young girls, Kamala Harris's nomination as a woman of color is more than just a political event. It's a pivotal moment in U.S. history that could shape our future. In Green Bay, Emily Riley, Action 2 News.
Even before today, Republican leaders have been criticizing Harris as part of an administration overseeing high inflation, what they call a crisis on the border. The RNC chair saying, quoting now, destroying American energy and crushing your pocketbook, putting dangerous criminals ahead of citizens, unleashing deadly chaos at the southern border. Harris's policies are drastically out of step with the American mainstream, end quote.